and welcome to another edition of Steve and Carrie's Holistic Buffet. Carrie, thank you so much for those last few episodes about emotional intelligence. All right, so today we have an expert, a lady called Anandi, who for many years has really focused on sleep, the neurological, the physiological, the spiritual implications of getting enough sleep, not getting enough sleep, and how to go about that. It's a really fascinating interview. So without further ado, here's Anandi. And here she is. Here's our friend Anandi. So nice to see you. Thank you so much for spending time with us.
You're very welcome. It's great to be here.
Now, I've said in the introduction there that you are a sleep expert, right? And your website, The Sleep Guru, there's a clue in the title there. Tell me a little bit about perhaps your background, how long you've been involved as a specialist in this area, and sort of where your interest, I guess, comes from.
Okay, yeah. So basically it comes from my own terrible issue with sleep and insomnia. So by the age of 27, I was already a chronic insomniac. And it went on for probably about 10, 12 years before I understood or started to understand what was going on. I had, acne rosacea, I had ulcers in my mouth, I had digestive issues. And I just wanted the ground to open up and swallow me up, basically, because I just felt so horrible every day. I didn't really know how I was going to get through the day. My mother then offered me one of her own sleeping pills, which I took one, and I felt worse the next day. And I just thought, this is just not the way that I want to go. And I started doing a bit of yoga, actually, but I realized the type of yoga, although I had a wonderful teacher at the time, she was wonderful and I did learn a lot from her, but I felt like something was missing. And I just decided, I was feeling so terrible, I'm just going to go to India for a while. And I just dropped sticks and went, because I felt like I wasn't getting anywhere. And when I arrived in India at this ashram, and I didn't really know where I was going, I just went almost like stick a pin in a map and I think I'll go there. It just felt like I was coming home. I found what yoga was all about and what breath was all about, what yoga Ayurveda was all about. And I realized that I was my own problem. And, I started to heal my own sleep issue, because that was obviously the first thing to manage. And then I realized that, this is the way that we need to do it, doing certain things in a certain order. So my passion really is about saying to everyone, look, there's a process, and most of the time you don't actually need drugs. There was an article in the news the other day, I think it was about 15% of the population are on unnecessary medication at the cost of 9 billion. And I think it's true, people, not blaming the doctors, but they don't have much time. When you're saying, I can't sleep and I'm feeling miserable, what do they give you? Sleep medication and antidepressants.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think that figure is that's probably a global figure, but I would imagine in the United States, it's more prevalent even than it is in Europe.
Yeah, I think it probably is. And I think probably in the United States, they're taking even more medication than we are, probably.
I think so.
Okay.
So your work is on an individual level, but you also work with corporates too, do you?
Yeah, so I do quite a lot of workshops and speaking events with corporates, where they'll, because it's such a big topic. And in fact, I was speaking to someone today, the fact that transition working from home has created a lot of disturbance in people's rhythm, because they haven't got boundaries, they don't know where they're supposed to be working, they're on the computer in their bedroom, and it's creating a lot of angst for a lot of people. And I just seem to have become since COVID busier in that area, where people are just asking me to speak to their team about sleep, because it's clearly a problem. And when staff don't sleep very well, they're foggy headed, their creativity is low, they're irrational, they can't make proper decisions, and they're not getting the best out of their team because they're just not functioning. Their well-being is just not at its best.
And anxiety obviously has been at an all-time high anyway. So then not being able to sleep feeds into that. And then that feeds into not being able to sleep. And that's that sort of never-ending self-fulfilling prophecy, which I can kind of relate to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a vicious circle. Absolutely.
And the fact that a home used to be a place of, relaxation and restoration. And now everything is muddled together, like you said, with computers in places where they didn't used to be. And I think some people struggle with setting that boundary.
Yeah, it's very, very true. They do. And yeah,
because sleep is very much from what I have read in your articles and kind of combing through your website and taking the test. There's a ritual to it.
There is a ritual to it. And I think that people, because of the way that we live these days, you've got to go, why are we still not very well when we have so much available to us? So we've got health shops, we've got nutritionists, we've got therapists, we've got yoga teachers, we've got yoga studios, we've got Pilates studios. We've got everything at our fingertips. How many vitamins do we need? If you go into a health shop, there's so much available, but yet we still haven't grasped the basics, and that's being in line with nature and not running uphill against nature. And I think that's where a lot of people, they're running around, they're going to the gym, they're going to the health shop, they're getting the magazines, and they're doing this sauna and an infrared bath and a this and a that. And it's just frenetic. And they're eating at the wrong time. They don't know what they're supposed to be eating for their type. And it's all basically needs to be simplified. I think that problem is our lives have become so complicated with everything that we're trying to stuff into our lives, and our fitness regimes and our health regimes and the therapists and the this and the that. If we were just to simplify our lifestyle and look at nature and being a bit more in alignment with nature, outside is a reflection of inside, inside is the reflection of outside. If we were only to understand just something very simple, when the sun is above your head, is it hotter or is it colder? Outside it's hotter, right? At the middle of the day, that's when the sun is at its hottest. So inside the body, the digestive fire in the body is doing the same thing as the sun. Therefore, it's at its strongest during the middle of the day. What are we doing? We're working, we're trying to work from home, we're doing all this stuff, we're going to the gym, and then we've got to eat at 8:30, 9 o'clock. And then what do? Well, we eat protein or, whatever it is. And of course, the cook's gone home by 9 o'clock in the evening, down in the gut. So the body's got to go, oh no, I'm releasing melatonin to try to bring the body temperature down. And you have now chucked in a load of protein that I have now got to turn the heat up, but I'm trying to turn the heat down. And that's just one example of the way that we live our lives. Even though you're taking the vitamins, you're going to the gym, you're doing that, but what that small thing is messing everything up. It's messing your digestion up. It's messing your sleep up. Yeah. If you were to just change it around slightly and have more of your calorie intake when your digestive fire is ready and wanting to digest food, plus you actually need energy for the rest of the day. Therefore, it makes sense to not chuck a sandwich down and hardly eat anything during the day and then bombard yourself with a big meal in the evening when actually you needed that energy during the day. Now your body's gone, now I've got to struggle and do things at the wrong time. So you could be doing all the right things, but at the wrong time of day. Yeah. And it doesn't take that much to actually, you don't need to buy lots of things to sort some of these issues out. It's actually looking outside and looking at nature and then looking at what am I doing inside, what's happening inside.
There's an interesting article actually today. I don't know if you saw it online. It was all over Twitter for me, at least anyway. There was an article in the Telegraph where there was a doctor. I've got it written down. I've got my notes written down.
Good, go for it.
A lady called Dr. Rebecca Robbins. It was actually kind of semi-sponsored by a bed mattress company.
Oh, right, yeah.
But so she kind of works with them. But essentially, some of the things that I picked up on was that around one of the things she said she noted was over the course of the day, our brain produces toxins. and the accumulation of which, if not offset, is associated with a lot of cognitive disorders like Alzheimer's and dementia and that kind of thing. And basically what sleep does is it counteracts them and kind of like superwashes the brain of those toxins, so that so if you don't get any sleep, those toxins don't get dissipated and can kind of get some sort of build up, which I found quite interesting.
Yeah, that's the lymphatics of the brain. So you have a lymphatic system for the body. So you have the lymph that goes around and collects all the stuff, and it just dumps it in all the dustbins around the body. Yeah. And the brain has something similar. It's actually quite a new discovery, the lymphatics of the brain. It's basically like going in with the scrubbing brushes and then washing it away. And your brain needs time to do that. It can't do that during the day. It has to do it when your body's sleeping. Yeah. And therefore you need enough time to do all these things. Your body and your brain are overseeing a huge amount of biological maintenance when you're asleep.
Yeah.
You're not actually, you think you're resting, part of you is resting, but that gives your body and brain time to do the things that it can't do when you're busy. So you have to get enough sleep. And people that say, oh, I'm good on 5 hours, or, it's not enough time. If you look at all the science and read all the neuroscience articles, you'll see that most people, in order to do all the maintenance and things that your brain and body needs to do, you need between 7 and 9 hours. Mm-hmm. And, I don't care what your chronotype is, you need a certain amount of sleep. Some people, yes, do need slightly less because they have more efficient sleep, because there is actually a group of people in the world with I think it's about 3% of the whole world population that have a certain amount of DNA, a certain type of DNA that allow them to manage on something like 4 hours, something like that. But what that means is that their bodies become super efficient and it manages to do everything it needs to do in that short amount of time. But the rest of us, mere human beings, not superhuman beings, need to have that amount of sleep and need to prioritize. People prioritize their gym, they prioritize their health food, they prioritize their health, not medication, their vitamins and things, but they forget all about prioritizing sleep. In Ayurveda, there's 3 main things. Sleep is one of them. Mm-hmm. Right use of energy, which is not hemorrhaging energy, learning how to conserve your energy a bit. That's what we don't do in our lifestyle. We're hemorrhaging energy all over the place, and we don't stop from the time we get up and the time we go to bed. And the digestive system is the other one. So there's 3 main pillars of well-being. Mm-hmm. Sleep, right use of energy, and digestive system. That's mental and physical. And if you look at those 3 things and focus on those 3 things, you can't go far wrong.
Yeah. And those of us who do have some kind of regular exercise regime as well, there's Cytogens as well, isn't there, in terms of that, is that how you pronounce it, Cytogens or Cytogens? Cytogens?
I'm sorry, I don't know much about those.
Cytokines as well, which reduce inflammation and infection. And they basically they, like you're saying, so when we go to sleep, cytokines, I think that's how you pronounce it.
It is, yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, go to work on the body. So like, for example, so that's why they'll, so both Kerry and I train with weights, and I know you worked in the fitness industry.
Yes, I did.
Years ago. Yeah, so there's the whole thing around you need to rest. Going in the gym for 6 hours a day is not good for you. You need to rest in order for your muscle then to repair and to grow and then to make you stronger. So that's another sort of reason, I think, why we need sleep, not just the cognitive side, but physically to repair. Because I'm one of those people who would, at periods of my life, and I'm kind of coming out of one, I guess, where 4 or 5 hours was kind of standard. And I felt like, yeah, I'm perfectly fine. I'm kind of being productive, and I'm going to the gym, and I'm getting all my work done, and I'm, you give me something, I get it done, and all of that. So I would have put myself in that category. I'm less 5 hours now, and I'm more 6, I guess. I do nap during the daytime.
Well, the thing is that what do you know what adenosine is? Adenosine. No. Adenosine. There's 2 sleep hormones. So you have melatonin, which is the hormone that tells your body, right now it's time to sleep. Well, now you've got to prepare. It's lowering the body temperature. It's toning the digestive system down. It's lowering the heart rate, slowing down the breath rate. So it's preparing your body to go to sleep. Mm-hmm. And then you have adenosine, which is the hormone called sleep pressure, or it's sleep pressure. And basically that builds up during the day. And that's the thing, you're talking about, 9 o'clock, I'm like, that is sleep pressure. That's not melatonin. That is the thing that you've got a lot of this adenosine building up and you just need to sleep. Mm-hmm. But if you were getting more sleep, it could be that you're not actually, because during the night you're metabolizing all the adenosine. Mm-hmm. In the morning, in theory, if you've slept for long enough and your brain's done everything it needs to do and everything is fresh and clean, you should be able to go through the day, without feeling like you're going to pass out at 9 o'clock. Mm-hmm. So it might be that you haven't actually metabolized all your adenosine. Therefore, during the day, you're just not as lively as you should be, because you've still got this sort of bit of like lethargy going on, because you haven't actually metabolized all the adenosine. Of course, then it's building up more during the day. So, you've got extra. So the thing is that that's possibly something to look at, that you're not actually getting enough sleep.
Okay, yeah.
The quality of your sleep. And obviously then you need to go, okay, well, I'm not getting enough sleep. Why is that? And that's what I do, is I go, okay, let's look at what the situation is. And we have to start with why. Why is it going on? What's happening? And why is that happening? And then we go, right, this is probably why. And now we need to actually decide what the plan's going to be to actually, so you can get the sleep that you need.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And is it for an adult too early to fall asleep at like 9:30? Or is that some people's just natural? Because I am an early to bed person. It's
me too. I'm in bed by 9:30.
Me too.
9:30, because I'm up at 5:45. And what you need to think about is that whilst you might be going to bed at 9:30, you want to give yourself sleep opportunity, the opportunity to have 8 hours. If you go to bed at, let's say, people say, well, I go to bed at 11 and get up at 7. Well, that's not an 8-hour sleep opportunity. That's going to upstairs to bed at 11 and the alarm's going off at 7. So you're probably, by the time you've cleaned your teeth and done your rituals or whatever it is, you're not actually going to be sleeping for 8 hours. But if you go up at 9:30, so by the time you've cleaned your teeth and done whatever you do, you're probably not asleep until 10:15.
Right.
And then, if I'm getting up at 5:45, I need to give myself that sleep opportunity. Therefore, and actually from an Ayurvedic perspective and a natural perspective and the way that your brain works and when it wants to get the sleep cycles in, actually that old wives' tale of saying the hours before midnight, are worth more than hours after midnight. That old wives' tale. They'll say that you need to get to bed before midnight. So if you look at sleep architecture, you'll see that in the early hours of the evening or early hours of the night, you're getting more of your deep sleep. And then in the early hours of the morning, you're getting more of your REM sleep. You might go into a deep sleep in the early hours of the morning, but not so much as you do in the early hours. Therefore, if you're going to bed and getting to sleep by about 10:15 or something, you've got a good opportunity to get the sleep cycles in, the deep sleep cycles in, which by nature, if we're talking about not running uphill against nature, that's when nature's like everything's gone quiet. That's when nature's in its deepest quiet time. And then, 3 a.m., you're coming up into lighter cycles, which is why a lot of people go, oh God, I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I can't go back to sleep. That's because you may have other things going on, of course, but you're coming up into the lighter sleep cycle. So if you have got something going on, some stresses in your life or your digestion's not quite right, you may well get woken up. But you'll see in the sleep architecture that actually, you'll sometimes, if you've got a sleep app, then you might be awake a little bit, although you don't even remember yourself being awake. But you come up and out and then you go back down into another cycle. So you're going into these cycles, but you need to give yourself opportunity. Nature, being in line with nature, being in bed by 10 and getting up at 6 is perfect, because the early hours of the morning, you're getting the opportunity to go into a deep sleep. Otherwise, what happens when you're going to bed at different times, you're in constant jet lag. You're in social, you're constantly jet lagged. The body doesn't know what it's doing. The body needs every single rhythm, every single cell of your body has a rhythm. It has a circadian rhythm, and it wants to do certain things at certain times of day. Therefore, it wants to go into a deep sleep in the early hours, between 10:30, 11 till 2. That's when naturally you would go into those deeper sleep cycles, because that's when it's nighttime. People that go, I get to bed at 12:30 and I get up at 8:30, 9. That's not in alignment with nature. That's not in alignment with nature at all. So your body's having to, you have to do the jet lag thing. It's having to get into that cycle, which is it's very difficult for shift workers. Very difficult for shift workers.
Can imagine, because they're fighting against that rhythm. And I think everybody has a natural rhythm or window. I really enjoyed reading through your website because I have a very complex relationship with sleep.
Yeah.
And after looking at your website, it made me take stock of, why my relationship with sleep is so complicated. And I wanted to share it briefly and then get your feedback, because the way that Steve and I tend to disseminate information on our podcast is by sharing some of our personal stories.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I was always a great sleeper until I went through a traumatic birth. And I delivered twins really early at like 32 weeks. My daughter was in the NICU for 3.5 months, and I lost my son when he was 10 days old. Okay. And that is when my sleeping stopped for so many reasons: emotional trauma, cesarean section surgery. How can you sleep with that? Wanting to check, make sure I was awake at night in case the hospital called, and then out the door at 6 a.m. every morning to get to the hospital and sit with my daughter. And then when I got her home, she didn't sleep. She was a premature baby with so many health conditions. And even though I had nurses, I was so traumatized and, had post-traumatic stress disorder from everything that had happened, grieving the loss of one child and taking care of her.
Yeah.
That by the time she was 8 months old, I took her into an appointment with her doctor, and he took one look at me and said, "When's the last time you slept?" And I said, "I think maybe 3 days ago." I had anxiety about this episode, because I think that in your life, you pick all the things, especially when you're going through a divorce, you pick the immediate things that you think need to be dealt with. And for me, my story has always been, I would rather take drugs and sleep than not sleep at all. So I'm just going to do that because I'm getting my 8 to 10 hours a night, and it's pretty much working for me. But the questions that I have are separate from what we know Tylenol PM does to a liver when it's taken every night long term. What I'm most curious about is when you are taking something to sleep, how does it affect the repairing of the brain at night? Because I do notice now that I'm in my 50s that I have foggy brain, and it must be because of the back and forth of the cocktail of drugs that I take to fall asleep.
Okay, so gosh, you have been through so much.
I know it was a really big, long story, but that's my sleep story.
I've heard quite a few stories, slightly different, but many stories like that. So just going back a little bit before we get into the other bit, Ayurveda puts a lot of importance on the actual pregnancy for the mother and the child, and how the child is born, and all that stuff that you would naturally say. The cesarean you had, so your daughter was pulled out, very
in a traumatic way.
In a traumatic, she was with her brother. And then not with her brother, but then not even with her mother, because she was in an incubator. And then obviously the breastfeeding thing. So that's been very traumatic for both of you. For both of you, that separation is very, very traumatic and very significant from an Ayurvedic perspective. And that's something, when I work with people, I work with people from birth, in the womb, anything that they can tell me about their time in the womb that their mother would have told them. I work from there. and then work through the life and then come up with, okay, this is where you are here now, but it's been accumulating from the time when you're in the womb for both of you. So that whole thing that you've been through is very, very traumatic, and you must underestimate that, and that needs to be processed.
Yes.
And obviously with the medication that you've been taking, obviously I understand it and that's how I felt as well. I think I just want to be unconscious. I just want to be unconscious because I wasn't sleeping for years, and every now and then I got a bit of sleep here and there, and I didn't want to take drugs. But at the time, I just wanted to be unconscious, and you almost feel like you just do anything to be unconscious.
Yeah. And I feel like I was so desperate for sleep. I had a different experience with the drugs than you did. I didn't wake up feeling weird. I woke up feeling like I was just joyous. I actually slept and I felt so good. And it seemed like the perfect solution to my problem. And I needed the energy to go through all the therapy, the different kinds of modality therapies I went through to deal with the trauma and to be a mother and all of the things. It just sort of seemed to work. And I had doctors telling me it was the right thing to do.
Of course you would have had doctors tell. I'm not saying that it's definitely the wrong thing to do, because I'm not a doctor, and I'm an Ayurvedic specialist. But obviously drugs have their place. And it saves lives sometimes. I've had an experience where my partner had a very serious accident, and if it wasn't for drugs, he'd be dead. Anyway, but the problem with drugs is that obviously they're very addictive, and there are side effects, and it does affect the quality of your sleep. It affects your REM sleep. So have you got a sleep tracker?
I don't, but I think it's as easy as downloading it on your phone. Right? Can you have an app or do those not work so well? What would you recommend for someone who's interested in?
I usually recommend an Aura Ring, which
I've heard of those.
Yeah, they're very, very good. Yes, you can do the watch thing, but I don't like having to wear a watch at night or anything that's flashing in there. An Aura Ring I find very good because it does heart rate variability, it does breath rate, resting heart rate, and the sleep cycles. And it's useful when I work with people. I do like people to have a tracker so that you can see what the impact is of certain things that you're doing. If you had a sleep tracker, it would be interesting to see what your REM sleep is like, because the drugs will affect the quality of the REM sleep, and the REM sleep is very important for memory and brain and processing.
I think that the REM sleep, and this gets me a little bit into talking about your quiz, which is so fascinating, and all of the elements. I took your quiz 3 or 4 times because I wasn't sure how to answer some of the questions, especially for women. For example, I've been a cold person my whole life with cold feet. That's one of the questions that you ask on your questionnaire. But now that I'm in menopause, I'm the opposite. I'm always kicking the covers off. So I didn't know if I should answer it one way or the other. And some of the questions I was like, I am A and I am B. So I went through the test and I took it leaning one way, and then I'd take it leaning another way and sort of get slightly different answers. But for the most part, I scored even across all of the types.
Okay. Yeah. Now that quiz gives you an idea. Of course, when I would do a session with you, it might come out as something very different. But the thing is with these types is that you're often a predominant type with a subtype.
That makes sense.
So the thing is that you were born with a constitution. There are 2 things. You see, you're born with a constitution, and then as you go through life, you develop imbalances. And we treat the imbalances. So you might be because the sleep types are connected to the Ayurvedic type. So sensitive sleep is Vata, if that means anything to anyone. It doesn't matter if it doesn't. Variable is Pitta, and good is Kapha. And you're born with a predominant type and a subtype usually. Sometimes you're tridoshic, which means you're balanced between the 3. It's more common to be one predominant and one less dominant. And then if you're in balance, that's good. But as you go through life, for example, something that you've gone through, you would have a more of a vata imbalance. So we would have to work on bringing that down. So we'd have to work on grounding, cook foods, eating at the right time. I know you do that. But work on your resilience, heart rate variability, keep an eye on that. We need to get you able to be more resilient. That means your heart rate variability needs to improve so that you can actually move from being stressed out and climbing up the walls back to a normal human being. But because of everything that you've been through, you've been climbing up the walls and trying to cope with that, and you've had some medication to help you. The ideal would be to start working on your resilience and then start reducing the medication. So processing, and I know it sounds like you've been doing quite a lot of processing.
I've done all sorts from, I started with cognitive behavioral therapy, but then I moved on to, therapy that deals with energy and the trauma from within versus trying to deal with it from the brain to the body. And there are times in my life that I've gotten to a point where I think, and I'm very familiar with my resilient zone. I have lots of little tricks of the trade that I use to work on it. But I think the part of the resilient zone that is so difficult for people is when it just gets too intense, right? It's like, like you said, broadening your resilient zone. I'm very aware of tracking. I'm very aware of being able to tell you where I am. And if I'm out of my resilient zone, I always go high state anxiety. I very rarely go low state, like depressive. Yeah. So I'm very, I'm familiar with that. And I would say that I've made some really great progress. The part of all of it for me that I've had the most trouble with. And I even, I was on antidepressants for years, and I had doctors tell me that because I was so close to a psychotic break, I could never go off of them. And I would have to stay on them forever and ever and ever. And I was on such a low dose that it was almost not a pharmaceutical dose, meaning that it was irrelevant. It was just the process of putting it in my mouth. I'm not on it anymore. But the thing that has always eluded me is the sleep. And I think to a certain point, like how Steve has talked about, if he has a big work day, we all have these stories that we build up in our mind about sleep. We all have our relationships with sleep. And I think there are certain things we tell ourselves that might not necessarily be true if we were better able to use some of the tools that you're talking about. Like in my brain, I can say, I don't sleep without drugs. Well, the reality is I do. Sometimes if I'm really tired, I will fall asleep without drugs. I just won't stay asleep. Yeah.
Okay. So that's really interesting. I think the thing is the way that I work and the work that I do and all the things that I've studied over the years, we've also got to start from within. And I work a lot with breath. Breath has a very intimate connection with the nervous system. And there's a breathing pattern for every single emotional state. And you can change your emotional state and you can change your body chemistry by using the breath. And I use that a lot with my clients. And it's a process and it takes time. And it's not just a bit of open mouth breathing and over breathing and getting
box breathing.
Yeah, box breathing is one thing. There's lots of different things, but it is very much a process. But what happens is when you work a lot with the breath, is you start breaking down some of the emotions that you're holding in your physical being, because you're holding stuff in your body as memory in your cells. And whilst you can work externally with things, you have to work internally. That's not searching outwards, but searching inwards. And the way to do that or a great way to do that, not the only way to do that, is through breath work. So that in yoga, just a very quick, not going into too much detail, there's different layers of the human being. And the mind will give you an experience of the outer world or the inner world. It depends how much what we call prana, how much vital life force you have. So if you think of the mind here, And then you have the next layer is vital life force. And the next layer is outside. And going the other way, you've got the mind and you've got the inner being. And if you have all this noise going on outside and not much life force energy, the mind is pulled outside. The mind is pulled out that way. But if you can build up your life force, then your mind will get more of an experience of your inner world. So whilst you're out there and you've got no life force, because obviously with the medication that you're taking and the amount of stress that you've been under, your life force will be really, quite reduced. You're probably going on adrenaline most of the time rather than life force, even though you look beautiful and you look incredible.
Thank you.
Anyone that's been through everything that you've been through, you look amazing. So you're doing something right. But I think that the thing to work on is building the life force. And to do that, it's like juice. We call it ojas. It's like the vitality of life. And to do that, you have to actually work inwards. You have to build that life force area, that life force layer. I call it the pranic cushion. And it's just building that up so that your mind can go inwards. And also when you're doing breath work, it will start releasing stuff. You carry a lot of grief in your lower belly area. Fear and anxiety in your lower belly area, and grief in your heart space, grief in this space.
What do we carry? What do we carry in our upper stomach?
In the stomach, in
like the diaphragm area.
That's grief. That's grief.
I have that.
Grief. And so looking at the way that the breath works, the diaphragm works, how the whole breathing apparatus works, and how the body's moving with the breath can tell you a lot of where you're stuck and how long the breath is, how you can hold the breath, how you can hold the breath in, how you can hold the breath out. It's really is fascinating. And that is the thing that helps break down the grief and the anxiety and helps you let it go. I've had lots of experiences, very strong experiences using breath, letting stuff go,
That's fascinating. For our listeners who might be really interested in this breathwork concept that you're talking about, what are the types of resources that we could reach out to, whether they're online or in person, that teach us about this concept of breathwork?
Okay, so I do have a little members channel, which people can sign up to. I'm happy to, if you like, I can share a link with you and they can have like a month's free access or something.
That would be amazing.
We'll put it up right here, right now.
I've got to get it. So I'll put it up for you. I'll give it to you.
We'll do it in the edit. Don't worry. It'll be there. There it is right now.
I'll give that to you. So that can be an introduction. There's some breathwork introductory practices and talks on there. And then, of course, there's always coaching with me, which, when they register and come in, I'll send them a little email and give them, options of what they would like to do. But it is so, so powerful. It really is powerful. And it has to be...
I notice that I hold my breath a lot, and we work on it in my therapy a lot. My therapist will say, when I'm telling certain stories, she'll say, "You're not breathing." I do notice it. And it's interesting because I've taken different types of yoga over the course of my life with different types of instructors. And what's the breathwork yoga class called?
Right. Well,
I thought there's one specific for breathwork.
Well, breathwork is called pranayama, but there's so many different types of yoga. For example, Iyengar yoga is very physical, physically focused, and they hardly ever focus on breath.
Yeah, that's the one I like.
Right,
of course.
That's the one I started with when I first started doing yoga, but I realized there's something hugely missing. And see, every yoga that we do in the West is hatha yoga, and it's difficult.
Yes.
It's all hatha yoga because it's all physical yoga. Right. That's what we're doing. But it's morphed into all these different types of yoga, Bikram, Iyengar, Anusara, Ashtanga, all these different types of yoga. And every teacher has their own style, and every teacher has a certain amount of breath work that they put in, or a certain amount of breath work that they don't, and a certain focus that they prefer. They like the more spiritual stuff, they like more sound work or whatever. Personally, I feel that there's no yoga without breath and no breath without yoga. Even just moving up and down, how can you move up and down without inhaling up and exhaling down? Go downwards into something without exhaling. And it's just, so I think the thing is, with people just need to find a type of yoga that actually resonates with them, and try 20 different teachers, because everyone is different. Everyone's different. Everyone has something different to offer. And it depends what you want to work on. But the way that I teach, I have philosophy, which is so important, because yoga is not just about breath. It's not just about posture. It's about philosophy. It's about letting go and being present. It's about being who you really are, shining your true self, all that stuff. That's what the true essence of yoga is all about. And that's the true essence of happiness. A human being that is present, balanced, healthy, will sleep at night. A balanced human being will sleep at night. And that's where the beauty of Ayurveda comes in, because the Ayurvedic people will use yoga for the mind, and the yogis will use Ayurveda for the body. And they're sister sciences. And what's happened in the West, they've been separated.
It's true. They're not harmonized.
They're not harmonized. And actually, that's how we've really desecrated it in the West.
Oh, what a shame. What a shame.
But there are people around, there are wonderful teachers around who have, recognized this and started reviving it. So there is a big revival, I think. But going back to the breath work, yoga, there's different levels of yoga teachers too. So a 200-hour yoga teacher, for example, won't necessarily know that much about the breath. They might have an introduction to, and then there'll be the next level we'll have more of an introduction to. And then there's a whole load of studying and extra work to be able to facilitate breath work. Therefore, do the research and everything to find someone who is a breathwork facilitator and a yoga teacher or whatever. But it goes together, and it's not just about headstands and lotus pose. You can be good at headstand and lotus pose, but not good at yoga.
I'm sure being in Los Angeles, you'll find one or two that might be. I was going to say, one of the other thing that Carrie and I both did was we took an online questionnaire, and here is the link, which we encourage everyone to pop on and go and check out, where you get an idea of what your sleep style is, which I found really interesting. I came out as classic. What was I? Classic. Something. Let me just come up.
You're the A.
The very first one.
The very first one.
Classical.
Yeah, classic sensitive.
Yes.
And then I got a bunch of tips of some things that I can do to improve my sleep situation too, which is really useful. I think I do quite a few of them.
What I do is I put my phone on aircraft mode in a certain time in the evening. It goes on aircraft mode, and then if I want to listen to something, which is rare actually, but I have it on offline, offline files, so I can actually just listen to it offline. Because I find it's a good way of disconnecting with the world. When I go on to aircraft mode, psychologically, I feel I'm disconnecting from the world. It's like I'm putting a barrier, I'm putting a boundary around me so that nothing is coming into my space. It could be psychological, but actually, having the Wi-Fi off in the bedroom is probably quite a good thing, actually.
And that brings me on to, because we don't want to keep you all night. We could, right, Carrie? Absolutely.
We could go I'm darting around a little bit.
No, that's all right. But this is a great, and Andy, this is a great introduction. And if you're open to it, we'd love to have you on again too.
Yeah.
A couple of just sort of high level kind of tips, I guess, in terms of what can we do as a routine? Let's say I'm a novice and I've not looked at this, but I do find myself struggling with sleep. What are some of the things that we can do tonight, that may aid our restful sleep?
Okay, well, it's important to remember rhythms and rituals. So going to bed at the same time, getting up at the same time, always having a wind down, having, at least an hour and a half wind down. You don't want to be watching a thriller, 10 minutes before you going up to bed. You need the peaceful wind down. Looking at nature, being in alignment with nature, eating light in the evening and more calorie intake during the day, doing some breath work or yoga in the evening, doing your physical aerobic exercise in the morning. There's lots of research, you can look it up. The body wants to do the aerobic stuff in the morning, all the muscle stuff in the morning. In the evening, it doesn't want to be pounding the gym, at 8 p.m., going running on the running machine, lifting all the weights and doing all that. That needs to be done in the morning. It's much better for the body. You'll get a much better result if you do it in the morning. Therefore, do that stuff in the morning. And in the evening, it's the wind down, it's the meditation, it's the breath.
Did you say the wind down or wind?
Wine. No,
wine. It's the wind down.
Wine.
That might be some of Carrie's.
Occasionally, you can have the wind down. Of course, we all have to have a wind down. Come on, we can't be. I work on this rule: 80-20% rule. 80% of the time, I actually need to do all the right things. Otherwise, I am a sensitive sleeper myself, and I will go off. So I have to keep my rhythm and rituals. But yes, I'll go out for dinner now and then. Yes, I'll have a nice glass of wine now and then. Of course, you've got to live.
Carrie takes the 80-20 rule. She drinks 80% of a bottle of wine.
That's what I do. Yes.
She's not an alcoholic.
I'm sure she's not. I'm sure she's
no. I do like wine. It's on my Instagram profile.
Yeah.
Hey, Andy, if there's anything finally from you, Carrie, I've found this absolutely fascinating. It's completely whet my appetite now, and I really want to find out more. So we encourage folks to go to your website. Just remind you, here is the link that we'll put in to go and have a little taster, a month free, you've said, and Andy, which is great. You've got your own podcast. Yeah. There's tons of resources on your website too. So please go.
There is. And I just want to let our listeners know as well, I want to encourage you to take the test because you will receive back an email that outlines some of the information that we've gone over already today. However, it might go to your spam. So make sure if you take the quiz and you don't see anything pop into your inbox, make sure you just check your spam folder and it will be there.
And Andy, you're awesome. Thank you so much. When I reached out to you a little while ago and went, and Andy, would you mind? You went, yeah, right. Yeah, sure. And I went,
we so appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah,
it's been wonderful. And we'll look forward to seeing you again.
Yeah, absolutely. Look forward to it.
Thank you.
Bye. That was my favorite one of all time, I think.